Welcome back to Miss G's Flipped Classroom Lessons. This lesson is going to be about basic body movement references. This is the content standard we're working towards. And this lesson is part of a 6-week unit lesson on exercise types for fitness. We've covered 3 areas of health-related fitness according to Fitnessgram and completed the baseline assessments. Last week we covered running and walking for fitness. And now we're going to be working on strength training for fitness and health, eventually flexibility exercises for fitness and health, and then group fitness instruction for fitness and health. We're going to continue to use the skills that we've learned in the past to gauge fitness. First, we're going to cover planes of motion. And again, this is used to describe movement patterns. My friends over here, the stick figures, you can see that I'm very artistic, are in anatomical position. The anatomical position is the universal starting position for describing movement. Hands at their side, facing forward, no bending at any joints, palms facing forward, feet facing forward. So from anatomical position, if you were to move in the sagittal plane, you're moving along an imaginary vertical plane that divides the body into the right and left half. In the frontal plane, you'd be moving an imaginary vertical plane that divides the body from front to back. And the transverse plane is an imaginary horizontal plane that divides the body into top and bottom. So keeping these definitions in mind and looking at these images here, take a few seconds and decide in which plane you think they're moving. Okay, first one is sagittal. Second one's frontal. Third one's transverse. Moving on to basic movements at the joints. Flexion is a narrowing of a joint in the sagittal plane. So for example, bending your elbow. Extension, increasing a joint angle in the sagittal plane, essentially the opposite of flexion. Abduction, lifting a body part away from the midline. Adduction, returning or adding, ADD, a body part to the body midline. Rotation, turning a body part on axis. And then hyperextension, increasing an angle more than the natural position, such as bending backwards. In a lot of movements, we don't like to do this to prevent injury. But for example, in the limbs, sometimes we have a tendency to do that for exercise purposes. Movement at the shoulder joints. Take a second to look at these images and decide, according to the definitions, what you think that their movement is called. Okay, so the first one's abduction, or abduction, moving away from the midline. Adduction, adding the body part to the midline. Flexion, bending at the joint, decreasing the angle. And extension, increasing the angle. At the shoulder, it's commonly confused because you're thinking that the angle is from the shoulder down, but it's actually from the shoulder up. Movement at the elbow. Okay, so we've got flexion at the elbow, extension at the elbow, and then rotation at the elbow. Movement at the hip. So this first image is in the sagittal plane, second one's also in the sagittal plane. And the first one is kind of like a kicking motion, moving the leg up at the hip. Second one moving down at the hip. So decreasing the angle, increasing the angle, and then just rotation at the axis. Movement at the knee. So the first one is bending up, second one is essentially unbending. So decreasing the angle, increasing the angle, and then rotating at the axis. So these basic terms are the most commonly used when learning movement skills, and we will use these whenever possible in future lessons, keeping in mind there are more. If you revisit the Edmodo website, there is a list on those additional terminologies. We will move forward into other terms like functional muscle groups, and then we'll move into the actual gym exercises, describing them using these basic terminologies. But these additional terminologies, if you remember them, we will always have an opportunity to earn extra credit on the quizzes by answering questions on those extra terminologies. So we'll see you in the weight room tomorrow. Thanks again.